So we're here to talk about unity, but not from a cliche perspective, but from a practical perspective, especially when the unity is expected with other individuals or other concepts or other things that don't necessarily agree or identify with what you identify. So let's talk from a very humanistic perspective for a second. When you're choosing a friend, someone who you want to hang out with, when you're choosing someone you want to do business with, when you're choosing a romantic partner, or any other type of relationship or any other type of, interaction, you're usually measuring how that person complements you or how you complement them or how you guys are together, to determine if this makes sense. So for example, let's start with friendship. If there's someone who you don't have a lot in common with, you don't enjoy their spending time with them, so you're probably not going to be their friend. You're not against them. You don't not like them. You're not like, you don't wish them any harm, but you're just not, of the same, mindsets, which are usually required, or similar mindsets or entertainment mindsets that usually are a prerequisite, sometimes a prerequisite for friendship. When it's a business partnership, same thing. There's a certain types of people that you like to do business with, not because it's good or bad, just because that's the way you like to do business. So you look for people who fit that mold of what you're looking for. And the same goes for all the other partnerships and relationships. So when we talk about unity, love your neighbor as yourself, as we like to say, we stress it as an important principle of the Torah. What are we actually talking about? Are we asking that we should be everyone's best friend no matter what, even if we don't enjoy hanging out with them, or we don't find it meaningful to hang out with them? I'm not being literal, but just like what is the expectation? Or that if someone needs our help, we're going to be there for them? What is really wanted here from the Torah, and is it even possible? The reason why this is important to stress is because let's talk politically for a second. We all know that politically, it's very divisive when it comes to political opinions. I don't just mean who to vote for, but just the different sides of just about any debate. Pick one out of the hat. The environment, animal rights, women's rights. Every single issue has very, very what's the right word here? Has very I'm looking for that, like, strong, opinionated side that do not, like, to put it nicely, do not see eye to eye, to the point that and I don't know if this is worse than before or not, but the point is that people don't want to associate with people who have other opinions. People don't want to do business with people who are on the other side of a political spectrum. People don't want to date or have a romantic relationship with someone who thinks differently. And right or wrong, the question now is, what is unity supposed to accomplish? Does it mean that we just forget about all the things? Now, let's say we're talking politically for a second, right? And you have a very, very strong opinion. Let's say Israel, right? We're all very, very strongly opinionated, emotionally invested, and emotionally connected to what's going on in Israel. And our opinions are very, very strong. And when we find someone who has the opposite opinion, we feel threatened, and we don't want anything to do with that person for obvious reasons, due to what's been happening in the last few months, right? So now let's go away from that example. I'm just using it as a way to get into the understanding of what it means to really disagree with someone else. But in general, is unity meant to be that, I don't have an opinion anymore, I don't have an identity anymore, I just want to merge into this one big melting pot or mush of one entity, and that's it? There's no more individuality, there's no more unique opinions, there's no more diverse thought, what is that the unity that we're talking about? And if not, how is it possible to really have unity with a bunch of people that everyone really disagrees, and those disagreements are not just thought disagreements, but they're actual life reality disagreements that make a difference in how things are done and are very, very hard to coincide? So we're going to tackle this from a Kabbalistic perspective on the number 3. The number 3 in halacha is very important, and we're going to explain how, and we're going to use it from a Kabbalistic perspective to understand unity as well. Why are we talking about this? Because in this week's parsha, we're told that it actually happened in the month of Siva, but we read about it this Shabbat, where when the Israelites, obviously, when last week we read about the splitting of the sea, and they traveled to to Mount Sinai, and when they came to the mountain, it says Vayichan Sham, that he camped. Now, the translation here is Israel camped, but if you look in the Hebrew, I'm going to point to it now on the screen. It says Vayichan Sham, that he camped, singular. So Rashi right away jumps on that, and he says, what is the Torah teaching us? Why does it use a singular instead of a plural grammar? So, and Israel camped there as one person with one heart. That it was a singular because when they arrived at Mount Sinai, they were 100% united. However, all the other encampments were accompanied by complaints and arguments. In other words, yes, they were united, but let's also understand that that was a big deal, because it wasn't just that they were, perfect world, everyone is great, pink butterflies flying everywhere. It wasn't rosy in every situation. This one particular time, an exception happened where they became completely united. Not only that, but Rashi continues later to say it wasn't just in the past, but also in the future. So it wasn't like this camping at the Mount Sinai was a game changer for all future unity conversations of the Jewish people. To the contrary, this was a one-time experience that they were united, but both before and after, there was lots of the opposite of unity. So that's in this week's parsha. The Rambam tells us a little bit about the mitzvah. Now, this is not just from the philosophical book of the Rambam. This is from the halacha of Rambam, the law. And the Rambam points out over here is that the idea of peace between people is what he's talking about, is so important and so fundamental to Jewish values that the entire Torah was given just to bring peace within the world, as the Torah as it says. I'm going to say in Hebrew first. We say this verse, by the way, when we lift the Torah at the end of the Torah reading. So when the person who's lifting the Torah and showing it to the synagogue, I'm sorry. So this is one of the verses that we say. And the Rambam uses this verse to teach us that the Torah's purpose is to bring peace. Now, let's think about this for a second. The Torah was given to us in code, right? At least initially, it was the 5 books of Moshe, which was first was the 10 Commandments, but then it was the 5 books of Moshe. And even then, we know that it's a code that required the oral narration that was also given to Moshe, but it was revealed over hundreds and hundreds of years by the sages, eventually till it became the code of Jewish law, in a way that we could all, understand what the Torah is teaching us when it comes to Jewish law. And it was not an easy ride. If you study the Talmud, or even if you study any aspect of Jewish law, you'll notice that there's many, many opinions, many debates, many disagreements when it comes to understanding Jewish law. And even though these disagreements were for the sake of Torah, for the sake of heaven, for the sake of God, nevertheless, they're still disagreements. So if the Torah's purpose was given for unity, to bring unity and to bring peace, well, it wasn't exactly accomplished throughout the process of revealing Torah, revealing Jewish law throughout the generations. So let's go to we're going to introduce now, before we get to the number 3, which is what I mentioned earlier, we're going to understand what was really happening when the sages would argue or debate halacha, Jewish law. And the reason why this is important, both to understand Jewish law, that Jewish law is not a matter of opinion, that, this rabbi in the Talmud says that this is the law. Well, I, see it differently, so I'm going to do it my way. That's very important to understand. It's not how it's done. It's not how Jewish law was meant to be revealed and taught. Every single law was given to Moshe at Mount Sinai. It was just revealed through the sages. So it's very important to understand Jewish law. So we're going to do that now. But as far as our lesson, as far as what we want to learn from it, we're going to use this as a way to understand what true peace and what true unity really means. So this is an interesting medrash. Let's take a look here. The words of Torah were not stated definitively when they were given to Moshe. When Moshe spent 40 days on Mount Sinai in a spiritual manner, learning the Torah from God, so Hashem did not give it to him definitively. Rather, for every law that Hashem taught Moshe, he presented 49 paths in which the ruling is it is pure, and 49 paths in which the ruling it is impure. In other words, let's say, is this kosher or is it not kosher? So 49 ways to say that it is kosher and 49 ways to say that it's not kosher. Same, and pure and impure is regarding many other areas as well. But in general, when it comes to Jewish law, Hashem gave him 49 options for each halacha. So what did Moshe say? Moshe responds to Hashem, Master of the universe, how will we ever render a definitive ruling? I'm sorry. So Hashem said to him, follow the majority. If the majority rules that it is impure, rule that it is impure. And if the majority rules that it is pure, rule that it is pure. Now, this is very important to explain. What does it mean to follow the majority? So I want to tell a story of Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz, who was a big tzaddik who lived in Eastern Europe. But at the time, the Jewish community was persecuted by the Christians very harshly. So we're talking about, I think, 400 or 500 years ago. And he was constantly brought into the palace of the squire to debate certain things on Christianity and certain things to sort of justify, Judaism's approach to certain things. It was actually during a good time for the Jewish people, or where that, I think it was in Poland, but it was a relatively good time in a sense that they were at least reckoning with the Jewish people. So one of the priests who were debating him or asking him questions said, doesn't the Torah say, achrei rabim lahates, follow the majority? And look, the majority of the world follows our way of religion, our way of what we believe. So doesn't your own Torah tell you to do what we do because we're the majority, you're the minority? And Rabbi Yonasan says the idea of achrei rabim lahates only applies, the idea of following the majority only applies when there's a doubt in what the right way is. In other words, if let's say a majority of the world decides that the world is flat, let's say the majority of the people of the world decide the world is flat, so are you expected to believe that too just because the majority believes that? No, because you know for a fact that the world is round. Through science and through gravity and through everything else that we've proven, we know that the world is round, including the Torah telling us this. We know that the world is round. So it's not up to a debate of majority versus minority when you're 100% sure about what the right answer is. The only time when the following the majority is applied in Jewish law is when you're not sure what the answer is. And in that case, you go after the majority. That's number one. Number two, and this is very important, who is eligible to be considered to have an opinion? This is important. Because let's say there's a medical procedure that you're not sure if you need to have. Let's say there's a elective, or let's say there's a medical procedure that someone needs to have, but there's a lot of questions. With every big procedure, I happen to know this personally as well, not always are the doctors 100% sure if it's the right thing for you, and they present you what they know. At least a good doctor should present to you, here's what I know, here's why I think you should or shouldn't do it. But ultimately, the decision's up to you because there are risks and whatever else. So imagine you go onto the street and you take a poll by a bunch of random strangers who are not doctors, who are not medical experts, and you ask them, should I have this surgical or medical procedure? It would be, and then follow the majority of whatever these strangers say. It would obviously be a very stupid thing to do because you're asking people who have no idea what the illness is, what the procedure is, and their opinion is frankly useless unless they have experience in that area. In a similar vein, the idea of the majority versus the minority had to be sages that were on a level of Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, in fact, any of the sages that are mentioned in the Talmud or mentioned in the Mishnah, or even before that in the Abshei Knesset Hagadola and throughout history and throughout, the lineage of Jewish knowledge, they all had smicha, they all had rabbinical ordination going back to in a chain back to Moshe Rabbeinu. And in order to be eligible for that smicha, you had to not just know the entire Torah backwards and forwards. And I don't just mean the written Torah. I don't just mean the oral Torah. I mean the secrets of the Torah, the medrash part of the Torah, the gematria, the remes, the gematria part, every part of the Torah you had to know backwards and forwards. Your character had to be 100%. And even then, many were rejected because they were not trusted to be part of this chain of smicha. In fact, smicha ended because there wasn't anyone else eligible to be part of this chain. So after Rav Ashi, after the end of the Talmudic sages, that's when there was no one left who was a musmach, and no one left who was a ordained from Moshe, and that's when the era of the great sages ended. And then new sages arose, but none of them had smicha, none of them had this ordination from going back to the chain of Moshe. So it's those people who are the ones giving their opinion. Is it pure? Is it impure? And the majority of those people's opinion is who we follow. Okay, why is that so important? Why is that? And let's ask the question even stronger. Why did Hashem make it so complicated? Poor Moshe. He's on Mount Sinai. He's amongst the angels who are fiery. He says Moshe was actually scared of them because Hashem was surrounded by the Srafim, by the highest level of angels who were fiery beings. And Moshe had to sit there and study from God himself. And Hashem is telling him, there's 49 ways this could be kosher, and there's 49 ways it could be not kosher. Just give it to us straight. Give us the detail. Why was the Torah given that way? More importantly, even if Hashem wanted to introduce, all these different options, why couldn't Hashem be the deciding factor? Why is Hashem telling Moshe that you should have human beings, even though they're great sages, but I'm really sorry. Even though they're great sages, but to have these human beings give their opinion and follow their majority. Why isn't Hashem being the one to make the final resolution of what the halacha is? So we're going to go back to this because this is where we introduce the number 3. That was the 3rd month that they arrived at Mount Sinai. Well, let's just read it over here. This is from the Talmud. That blessed is the merciful one, blessed is Hashem, who gave the Torah to a 3-fold nation by means of a 3rd born on the 3rd day in the 3rd month. Pretty interesting, right? It's pretty cryptic as well. But basically, what does it mean, a 3-fold Torah? We're going to explain. What does it mean, a 3-fold nation? We're going to explain. What does it mean, a 3rd born? Well, Moshe was the 3rd born of his family. What is the 3rd day? Torah was given on the 6th of Sivan. So what is the 3rd day? So it's the 3rd day of the preparation. But the 3rd month is the month of Sivan. But now we have to answer, we have to explain, why is Torah considered the 3-fold Torah? And why is the nation considered the 3-fold nation? We're not done yet, though, with the conversation about how halacha is determined through the debate and argument. And that's what we have to get to. And this is the question here we're going to address. Is how could the Torah, which is all about bringing peace to the world, how could it be determined? How could halacha be determined through all this debate and argument, which would get very heated? As you look in the stories of the debates, they would get very, very heated, and it wasn't always smooth sailing. So what's the deal? So every morning in davening, before we start davening, so we say what's called the Karbanos or Fanfar, or there's different ways of saying it. But in the end, right before we say Hodu, there's a Mishnah that we quote. It's a Brisa or a Mishnah, but it's from Rabbi Yishmael. And he basically elaborates the 13 principles of how Jewish law is determined. For example, the Kal V'chomer, which is basically learning from the lesser law to the more strict law, or Gzeira Shavah, if there's 2 words in the Torah that are similar. So the halacha in one place applies somewhere else, and there's 13 principles. But the 13th principle, which is what we're going to read now, it says like this: When there are two verses that contradict each other, the meaning can be determined by a third verse that reconciles them. In other words, when there's two verses that argue or that contradict, the third verse will come in and reconcile them and give us the halacha. Not just in halacha, but also in understanding the Torah, as we have in this week's parsha. We'll go back to this, but what is in this week's parsha, the contradiction? So what does it say? It says that Hashem, this week we're reading the Ten Commandments, and right before we read the Ten Commandments, it says that Hashem descended upon Mount Sinai, the peak of the mountain. That Hashem came down in all his glory to Mount Sinai. What does it say later on? Then Hashem told Moshe, tell the children of Israel, tell the Israelites, tell the Jews that you have seen me from the heavens and I've spoken to you from the heavens. Which one is it? Did Hashem speak to the Jewish people from the heavens, or do you speak to people from the mountains? Now, obviously, Hashem is everywhere, but why would the Torah give us two contradicting verses? So then comes a third verse later on in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, that explains it. And what does the third verse say? What does the third verse say? So from the heavens, he let you hear his voice. To instruct you upon the earth, he showed you his great fire. So there's a concept in Kabbalah, as well as in Chassidus, as well as in Halacha, the difference between Shmiya and Riyah, the difference between hearing something and seeing something. I'm going to talk the Kabbalistic perspective just because it's easiest to understand, interestingly enough. But from a Kabbalistic perspective, there's two ways to experience something. You can experience something by hearing about it. So let's say you hear about something crazy that happened. Someone tells you in all the gory graphic details what happened. So it's mind-boggling, which would be included even seeing it on a video. It would still be in the level of hearing about it because it's still like you're not there. But then there's the seeing it up close, being there. If you were actually at the place and time where this incident happened, it would be a whole different experience. Because even though you could see the same thing on the video or hear about every single detail or read about every single detail, but experiencing it up close is a whole different level of understanding. And the reason why Kabbalah explains it is explaining the difference between some of the prophets and the way they were able to connect with Hashem. Some connected to Hashem on a level of hearing about Hashem. In other words, a more distant connection. And some connected to Hashem on a level of seeing. In other words, like Moshe was able to connect to Hashem on a level, not that he saw Hashem, but his experience was like as if he was experiencing it in front of him. Why? So that's what this third verse is coming to teach us, is that from the heavens, Hashem was the experience at Mount Sinai was hearing the halacha, hearing the laws. I am your God. Do not worship idols. Do not have any foreign images. So the laws were coming from heaven, but the experience of connecting with Hashem then happened on the mountain. So they were able to experience Hashem on the mountain, but they heard Hashem from the heavens, which is not a contradiction because Hashem is everywhere, and Hashem was allowing his presence to permeate in different ways so the Jewish people could have the multi-pronged experience of receiving the Torah. And there are many such cases where there are two verses that contradict each other, and a third verse will come to answer it. So now let's go back to the discussion about the sages arguing about halacha. But by the way, this is part of the answer. So Rashi explains that his glory was in heaven, and his fire and his power on the earth. But we already spoke about this. But now let's talk about the debates that would take place between the sages of the Mishnah, of the Talmud, even before that, when they would try to learn the halacha of what the law is. So a very good example to understand how these debates would work is from the story that we have on the screen. I'm going to give you some background though. Up until till a little bit after the Bar Kokhba rebellion, the way the Jewish month, the calendar was set, was every month by month. And this is the way the Torah teaches us, is that if there were witnesses that noticed the moon disappear and reappear, those witnesses would come to the court in Jerusalem, and they would testify in front of the sages. And the sages would, even if the sages already knew that it happened, but they needed to have witnesses who saw it. That was part of the halacha, part of the process. And as soon as the witnesses testified that they saw it, and saw the new moon, they would establish a new month, and they would light fires on all the mountains around Jerusalem, and then all the other cities would light fires on their mountains. So the whole Israel knew that the new month was established. That's how it took place. The only reason why it stopped is when the Jewish community was spread out so far where it was impossible to communicate that the new month was established. And especially when it comes to holidays, it was a big problem. So Hillel's grandson, great-grandson, introduced the calendar, which was more consistent in a way that it still followed the cycle of the moon, but it still allowed, the concept of establishing the new month without requiring the witnesses to come into the courts. One time it happened, the month of Tishrei, which is a very important month to establish the right date, because depending on when you established the new month, that right away becomes Rosh Hashanah, which is a biblical holiday. 10 days later is the holiday of Yom Kippur, also a biblical holiday. And then comes the holiday of Sukkot. So it was very important that they know exactly what day, and as early as possible, what day the Rosh Chodesh happened. So it happened. So what? So it came to be that two witnesses came in one morning and testified they saw the moon the night before, and the sages established that day to be Rosh Hashanah. That day was the first day of Tishrei. However, that night, when they were already expecting to see the new moon, because if the new moon was reappeared already the night before, the next night it for sure should be visible. Well, it wasn't visible, or at least it brought into question, did the witnesses really see the new moon or not? And there was a big debate amongst the sages. What do we do? Do we believe the witnesses, or do we use the evidence that we have right now that there's no moon? Maybe the witnesses were wrong or were lying. So Rabbi Yoshua, who was one of the sages in the courts, said that we can't believe the witnesses because we have evidence against them. But Rabbi Gamliel said that since we already established that the witnesses were telling the truth, and we already established the new month is established, and we're not going to change it. And what did Rabbi Gamliel do after he? So according to Rabbi Yoshua, the new month started the next day. And according to Rabbi Gamliel, the new month already started the day before. Which means that according to Rabbi Gamliel, the Yom Kippur is 9 days later. According to Rabbi Yochanan, Yom Kippur is 10 days later. So what did Rabbi Gamliel do? So now I'm going to start reading. Rabbi Gamliel sent a message to Rabbi Yoshua, said, I decree against you that you must appear before me with your staff and with your money on the day of which Yom Kippur occurs according to your calculation. So on the 11th of Tishrei, which is according to Rabbi Gamliel's Psak Halacha, that the Rosh Chodesh was already established, means on the 11th of Tishrei, which is not a holiday, he wants Rabbi Yoshua to come appear before him with his stick and his money, which is a violation of Yom Kippur, according to Rabbi Yoshua, who believed that the month should start the day afterwards. What happened? Rabbi Yoshua took his staff and his money, and he went to Yavne to visit Rabbi Gamliel on the day of which Yom Kippur occurred according to his own calculation. Upon seeing him, Rabbi Gamliel stood up and kissed him on his head, and he said to him, come in peace, my teacher and my student. You are my teacher in wisdom, and you are my student as you accepted my statement. So the commentaries go on this for a while, where they're trying to understand what was Rabbi Gamliel trying to accomplish here. Rabbi Gamliel was the head of was the Nasi, so he was the one in charge to decide what the halacha needs to be. But what is he trying to do? Humiliate Rabbi Yoshua to say that I'm going to force you to do something against your belief because you believe Yom Kippur is a day later, so I'm going to make you violate your own Yom Kippur. Like, was he that egotistical? What was he trying to do? So this is where the third pasuk, or the number 3, comes into play. Why? Because Rabbi Yoshua was very, very passionate, or very strongly opinionated, that the witnesses were lying. Right? So the fact that Rabbi Gamliel ruled against him doesn't change his opinion, but it does change the halacha. It does establish the halacha. So now, what is Rabbi Gamliel scared of from a very simplistic point of view? That sages who have every reason to disagree with something, we have to make sure that everyone understands that once the halacha is paskin, it's a Hebrew Yiddish word, which means established, then everyone has to accept it, whether you agree with it or not. But why? Why is that so important? And this is where the number 3 comes in. Just like with marriage, when two people get married, and it's a very spiritual ceremony in Judaism, it's not just a husband and wife getting married to each other and committing love to each other and making their vows to each other. It's about bringing God into the relationship, establishing the fact that they are committing to each other because that's what God wants them to do, and they want to build a home that God will feel comfortable in, and they will fulfill the mission that God gave them together. So it's bringing in the third partner, which is an altruistic. It's a way of elevating themselves to a point and to a level where they are not doing anything selfishly. It's all about the cause, and it's all about what is expected of them from a godly perspective. The same is true over here with the sages. Is that yes, Hashem wanted that the sages should be the ones to bring the Torah into their heads and into intellectual understanding as a way to ensure that the Torah is not just in the heavens, but it's actually brought down to an intellectual level below. It's very important. But at the same time, they were doing it for the sake of heaven. They were only arguing about it for the sake of heaven because they wanted to make sure that they got it right. And once it's established, and once you have that humility that everything is about Hashem and everything is about what Hashem wants, so it doesn't really matter if your opinion is still that the witnesses are lying. This is the halacha. This is how Hashem established it, and therefore I'm going to respect it. And when you have that third element, or that third unifier, it's not that you forget who you are and your opinions change and you become blank or you melt into this other person. It's that you understand that there's something greater than you and that you're doing this for something greater than you. So you're still the same person. You're the same opinionated person in one area, but you're uniting for something greater. Now let's take this even further. So when it comes to everything in life, actually, let's read this on the screen. Halachic ruling in Torah is a product of the 3 unity. Even when one opinion is rejected, in the final ruling, the Torah, the truth of the Torah is always a unanimous decision. And this is back to that Medrash statement where it says the Torah of 3. Why the Torah of 3 is because it's the third opinion. In other words, it's the majority opinion. It's the halachic ruling that confirms the Torah of what the Torah really wants from us down here. So it's not about, yes, studying the Torah could be about the different opinions. But when it comes to the halacha, it's the third ruling. Why are we the third nation? Well, it's referring to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the nation of 3 patriarchs. But the third nation, more importantly, is that we realize and we recognize that it's not just about Moshe's opinion or Yankel's opinion, but it's about the fact that we're all uniting for the third higher than either of us, and for something greater than all of us, and we're committed to that, even if it's difficult, and even if it goes against our personalities or our opinions or anything else that would prevent us from experiencing the godliness that's associated with the Torah. Okay, let's take it even further though. So when it comes to the Exodus, we just talked about number 3. So where do 1 and 2 play a role here? So we look in the month of Nisan, and what does it say? It says that on the, at 430 years after they were in Egypt, and it's talking about when Yosef arrived in Egypt, or even before that. But the point is that at the end of the 430 years, on this exact very, very day, it also had a very specific time. The Jewish people left the land of Egypt. It's about very, very specific, this is when it was. In fact, it says that Hashem designated the 15th of Nisan when he created the world to be the day that the Israelites leave Egypt. In other words, it was designated as a day of freedom, as a Leil Shimurim, as a night of protection and a day of freedom, even before it happened. So we don't celebrate Pesach because that's when we left Egypt. We celebrate Pesach because that day was already designated by Hashem to be the day of Exodus. So Nisan is all about absolutes. It's all about first understanding that we're all part of Hashem. There's one infinite God. And that there's no personality, there's no individuality, nothing. It's just that first raw, pure unity. That's what Nisan represents. That's the first one. But then comes Iyar. And Iyar is very different. I'm going to paraphrase what's on the screen, but you're welcome to read it. ER is when it's the mitzvah of ER is the Sfiras Omer, where every night we are counting on the day of the Omer, which we're refining another character trait of our unique self. In fact, all 7 character traits have the other 7 built within them. So we're diving deep into the details and then into the specifics of who we are. We're kriching in to understand where my faults are, where my ego is, where my animalistic instincts might be taking over. How could I fix it? You're not just, oh, we're all good, we're all happy, like we're all free. No, that's Nisa. That's you know, that was last month, is where we're just forgetting about ourselves. We're all uniting with Hashem. Hashem's taking us out of Egypt on the same day. We're all one nation. That's Nisan. ER is when we start to break down the details. I'm me, you're you. Even within me, there's certain parts of me that are like this, and certain parts of me that are like this. And we break down the most random details of Sfiras Omer, which is why the mitzvah happens every single day of ER. So that represents the counter opinion. The first opinion of Nisan is unity. We're all one. We're all together. Hey, we're all brothers. You know, that kind of approach. ER is breaking down the details into the specifics. But then comes Sivan. And Sivan is after we've already established that we're different. We establish, and not just are we different, me and you, but we're different even within ourselves. But we realize that there's all these different pieces and moving pieces and complexities that go on. We still wrap it up together and say, even though I'm me, and even though I am, you know, I think this way, and you think that way, we're putting it aside because Hashem is about to appear to us on Mount Sinai and give us the Torah. That's true unity. True unity is when you could actually love someone who you disagree with, where you don't agree with them, you don't change your opinion, they don't change their opinion, but you're able to put it aside for something greater. That's true unity. That when it comes to individual relationships, when it comes to God, when it comes to anything, is that we are not forgetting about the details of who we are. We're not forgetting about the touch points of what makes us who we are and what makes us different, and whether it's our opinions, our looks, our styles, our culture, everything else that might separate us and divide us. We're not forgetting that. But even with that, we're allowing that to actually be a prelude for us, saying that even with all that, we're still going to unite for a higher cause and a higher purpose. So Sivan, this I will read. Sivan, the 3rd month of the year that builds on the great revelation experienced collectively during Nisan and the individual self-reflection of ER, Sivan brings it together, celebrates the unique contributions of each individual, provides to the Jewish nation overall unity. And that ultimately is the best type of unity, because it's not fake. It's not just, oh, let's unite and cliche and whatever. No, we understand that we're different. We understand that there's things that we're going to disagree tomorrow. We're going to fight tomorrow. We're going to hate each other. We might even hate each other tomorrow. But today we're going to unite for something much holier and special. In a way, we actually, I would like to, I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I would like to use the post Simchas Torah, post October 7th approach in Israel, where there was such a strong, it still is a good thing, hopefully, such a strong unity between the religious and the secular, so-called secular of Israel, where there was such a divide before, where basically you had all these like Bnei Brak and Mea Shearim Hasidim coming out to give out food to the soldiers and they like you saw like lines and lines of buffet tables where you had these heavily religiously garbed people giving out food to the soldiers, and the soldiers were hugging them. Weeks before they hated, I don't know, they hate each other. Weeks before there was no peace. Now they weren't changing who they were. They weren't even changing their opinions. They weren't changing their dress. They weren't changing it was just the fact that right now there's something more important than the way I dress and the way you dress. There's something more important than how I believe or how I serve God and how you serve God. There's something greater. And that's the kind of unity we're talking about here, is because it's not that you're dissolving yourself, your personality, and putting away your opinions or changing your opinions. It's that even with all that, you're able to rise up to a level where you're still able to tolerate and to appreciate the differences and celebrate the differences of other people, because it's all for a greater cause, the number 3, which is the godliness that unites it all together. So here's a quote from the Alter Rebbe. Sorry, let me go back. So the Alter Rebbe says like this: there's a direct and easy path towards fulfilling the mitzvah of love your fellow as yourself. With regard to every Jew, great or small, for in reality we are all equal. We all have one Father in heaven. Therefore, all Jewish people are called siblings, because we all come from the same creation. In full sense of the word, for we all share a common root of one God. Only our bodies are distinct from each other. This is what the Alter Rebbe writes in chapter 32 of Tanya. Now, that's the first level. That's Nisan. But then comes the fact that even though we are separated in our bodies, and even though we are different and we approach things differently, and we're still able to unite, that's even a greater level of unity and love. So it doesn't mean that we change who we are, we become, it just means that we respect the other person in a sense that we put our egos aside for something greater. And that's the unity that we're looking for. And that's the real unity that's going to bring Mashiach. So let us hope that we'll be able to rise up, not just in tragic times, but in all times, be able to rise up and not change who we are, but at least be able to work with other people, talk to other people, unite with other people, as we are different and unique, but still be able to unite and join in celebrating our connection to Hashem with the Torah, and hopefully with Mashiach very soon. Good Shabbos, everyone. Thank you all for joining. If it's okay, I'm going to get off.
Thank you. I hope you feel completely better and have a good Shabbos.
Thank you so much. Good Shabbos, everyone. I really, really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Thank you.